Just think of a sinister figure, worshipped in macabre rituals, whose cults entail practices so horrifying that they still elicit fear and disgust to this day. This is Moloch, a mysterious and feared entity whose roots stretch far back into the Middle East's ancient civilizations, where his name came to be synonymous with human sacrifice and rabid devotion. In this video, we will unravel the secrets underlying this disturbing god, looking at his origins, the rituals devoted to him, and the impact of his cult on history and pop culture. Moloch emerged from the depths of ancient Semitic religions, venerated in ancient times by the Amorites, Canaanites, and other Semitic cultures of the Middle East. He is often associated with human sacrifice rituals, particularly of children, something which endows him with a gruesome essence that continues to this day. Moloch was not just a one-off entity, but part of a wider pantheon of gods and demons that formed the mythology and religion of Semitic civilizations. His cult was woven into the religious practices of the Amorites and Canaanites, who worshipped a variety of gods associated with fertility, war, and hellish realms. Moloch worship, however, stood out for its particularly sinister nature, hallmarked by human sacrificial rituals, a practice that instilled horror and reproach. Moloch's mentions in the Bible and other ancient sources bolster this two-faced perception of power and abhorrence. For instance, in the book of Leviticus, Moloch is cited in contexts that emphatically condemn child sacrifice. It reads, "And you shall not let any of your descendants pass through the fire to Moloch." This commandment highlights the utter abomination that these rituals pose to the Israelite faith. Moloch's iconography also provides clues to his identity. He is often depicted as a humanoid figure with the head of a bull, or as a hollow metal idol, where children were laid to be sacrificed. These visual representations were intended both to intimidate and to assert the fearsome power of this god. As well as biblical references, other ancient sources such as Ugaritic texts and Phoenician inscriptions also speak of similar practices, suggesting that Moloch was a widely acknowledged and feared entity throughout the region. But why did ancient civilizations conduct these child sacrifices? For Moloch worshippers, sacrifices represented an extreme form of devotion, a way of obtaining divine favor, prosperity, and protection. It was thought that sacrificing something as precious as a child's life would bring immense joy to the god, who would grant blessings to his followers in return. This brutal and extreme logic shows how desperate and intense the faith of these cultures was. In archaeological terms, sacrificial practices to Moloch are found at sites known as Tophet. The Tophet of Carthage, although in North Africa, was colonized by Semitic settlers of Phoenician origin, and this is where numerous urns have been found containing the cremated remains of children and animals, showing that sacrifices were a widespread practice among the Carthaginians. Phoenician inscriptions at these sites frequently contain vows and promises made to gods such as Baal and Tanit, proving that sacrifices were an integral part of religion and public life. In Moloch rituals, children were put into the outstretched hands of the bronze idol, or directly into the burning hole. These living sacrifices to the god were regarded as the ultimate offering that a people could make to their god. This macabre ritual not only acted as a manifestation of utter faith, but also as a means of controlling and manipulating society through fear and religious fervor. Besides biblical and archaeological sources, classical authors such as Plutarch, Diodorus, Siculus, and Philon of Byblos also described these practices, often with horror and condemnation. For instance, Plutarch describes how the Carthaginians sacrificed their children in desperate times, trying to appease the gods and overturn their calamities. Although often fraught with moral judgment and exaggeration, these classical accounts provide further insight into how Moloch worship was perceived by neighboring cultures. The impact of these sacrifices on culture and history is far-reaching. Not only did they define the perception of Moloch as a sinister and bloodthirsty entity, but they influenced the legal and ethical standards of later societies. The biblical prohibition of human sacrifices to Moloch is one of many examples of how later monotheistic religions stood against the ritual customs of their polytheistic predecessors. Moloch sacrifices were not an isolated phenomenon in the ancient world. Several cultures across the world featured similar rituals, reflecting a pattern of extreme devotion and human sacrifice in their religious observances. Among pre-Columbian civilizations, especially the Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas, human sacrifices were a central part of their religious practices. For instance, the Aztecs believed that the gods needed human blood to secure the movement of the sun and the continuity of the world. Major ceremonies, such as the dedication of the Templo Mayor in Tenochtitlan, involved sacrificing thousands of prisoners of war, whose hearts were offered to the gods. While the cultural contexts are different, the belief that human sacrifices could secure prosperity and divine protection is a clear parallel to the cult of Moloch. Norse mythology also had a significant role for human sacrifices. The Norse carried out sacrifices to gods such as Odin and Thor, especially in difficult periods, or to ensure victory in battles. As with the cult of Moloch, Norse sacrifices were viewed as a means of securing divine favors, reflecting the idea that human life could be a prized offering. The fact that human sacrifices are found in so many diverse cultures hints at the pervasiveness of the practice as an extreme means of religious expression and an attempt to control fate. Be it to appease gods, guarantee generous harvests, ensure victory in battles, or protect the community, human sacrifice is seen as a last, desperate solution. These practices illustrate the power of religion as a driving force and the depth of human despair and devotion. When addressing the theme of human sacrifices to Moloch, one cannot help but reflect on the extent of human cruelty and despair. The act of sacrificing children to a god forces us to confront the limits of faith and morality, questioning how far humanity is willing to go for the sake of religion and power. With the centuries, the figure of Moloch evolved and kept being reinterpreted in different contexts. In medieval and Renaissance literature, he is often portrayed as a demon, or the personification of utter malevolence. This demonizing process reflects not only the lingering of his frightening image, but also the way in which later societies dealt with the legacy of these ancient practices. Modern pop culture still uses the image of Moloch and his sacrifices as a powerful metaphor for tyranny and needless slaughter. He appears in several works of literature and cinema as a symbol of the human toll of unbridled greed and blind devotion. For example, Fritz Lang's film Metropolis features Moloch as a man-eating machine, an image eerily reminiscent of ancient sacrificial brutality. Moloch remains a powerful and disturbing symbol today. He is often cited in fiction and pop culture as a metaphor for tyranny, needless sacrifice, and the moral stakes of human actions.